All right. Good evening, everybody. We are live coming to you from Maritime Security Talk, and tonight we have a special guest, Mr. Chris Roberts, and he's graciously appeared to agree to appear, even though he's super busy getting ready for a flight to RSA. But we really appreciate it. So, and with that, I'm just going to real quickly mention that the opinions expressed during this recording are our own personal opinions and do not necessarily reflect our past, current, present, future, or any other employer that may have occurred in this lifetime or a different lifetime, including the time that I worked at McDonald's way, way back when. So, whatever. Um, these are our opinions and just let it be, okay? Oh, by the way, this is rated PG, PG-13, maybe a
Oh,
little bit R. So if we drop a few cuss words, make sure you don't have any kids around. So, for that, hey Chris, welcome.
thank you for having me. I didn't realize this was PG-13. I'm gonna have to be at least slightly civilized, which I normally am not. And yeah,
Well, I mean it is YouTube after all, right? I mean,
exactly. Yeah, kind of what is what it is. Let's face it. That and the fact that oh yeah, that and the fact I'm surrounded by alcohol at the moment. It's. I mean, what 2 years ago we were at RSA, and just before we decided to kick off COVID, and they wouldn't let me wear my plague mask. And this
uh,
time around, apparently, we've got monkeypox and COVID. So it's like, yes, double down. How to wipe out humanity using infosec?
yeah. So Chris, you got you're quite well known within the aeronautics industry, and congratulations on the new role. And
Thank you.
for somebody actually going to take and use your experience for that
Yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah, it's appreciated. Let's put it that way. That it's a positive impact as opposed to it's that whole thing of it's nice to be inside to be able to fix things rather than outside throwing bricks at the windows kind of thing.
Yeah, no kidding. And it's awesome. I was like, man, that's about the perfect spot for him.
Yeah,
That's
happy
and
one.
yeah. So how's it been? How's it going in the new gig for you?
It's good. It's nice. It's I think what I like about it, and it's interesting because this ties into some of the maritime conversations as well. Because
Mm,
I mean, I've done a bunch and had a bunch of conversations, but it very much so ties into a more forward thinking and a much more positive set of conversations. This is it's I put a LinkedIn post out I think this morning, and I
mm-hmm.
mean we were sitting and having a meeting with a couple of us, like kind of like we are now. We're sitting talking, and we were BSing because we have eyes on the environment, but it's not as cohesive as I'd like it. So like, all right, let's look at security orchestration stuff and a couple of other different things. One of the software engineers who sits close by kind of circles around. He's like, "Hey, do you mind if I say something?" I'm like, have at it. And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, "Well, I've used da 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 before." I'm like, "Well, then get your ass over here. You got an opinion?" And he's like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Why the hell wouldn't I be?" So
Yeah.
he came over and we started talking about his experience with one of the packages. It was a positive one. And then he's like, well, in the software team, we're looking at doing something similar because obviously they've got a shit ton of apps all over the place and they want to start seeing what the hell's going on with them. I'm like, so how far down the path? He was like, well, we're starting to look. I'm like, well, so are we. Why don't we join forces and actually collaborate and find a package that works for all of us? And I'm like, you don't find that in most of like IT infosec. I'm literally, it's like a freaking Alice in Wonderland moment. Like, have I died and gone to infosec heaven? Have I gone down a freaking rabbit hole again? Or is this, I mean, you're sitting there, you're like, holy shit, this is actually, we preach it. We've
Mm-hmm.
all done it in our own industries. We've all done it in the maritime industry. We've all done it in various companies where you walk in, you're like, for crying out loud, I'm going to bash your fucking heads together until you all can actually work together properly. We're all in this together. It doesn't matter if you're IT, infosec, network, DevOps, whatever the hell you are.
Mm-hmm.
We're in this together. We kind of need to solve this together.
Yeah,
So it's actually really
exactly.
nice. Yeah, it was a nice. I've been there 4, 5, 6 weeks now, so I've been fortunate. I've done board meeting stuff and a few other
Yeah.
things, and this was it's kind of like, okay, this the rose-colored spectacles have come off, and it's still actually a good place. So yeah, it's really nice to.
Is is this your first time sitting in the seat?
No, I'm
No.
fortunate. No, I'm fortunate. I've been in that seat a couple of times. However, caveat on that one. The last time I was, so for the last 15 years, I've been on the, to some degree, vendor side, either vendor side or I've been building my own company and research. As a researcher, in some ways, you're also on that side of the business as well. But the last time I was on like this side of the fence, for want of a better way of putting it, was probably 15, 16 years ago when I worked for TSA and I was in as the director of engineering and I ended up taking over the CISO role there. So that was a long time ago. And then since then, it's been like vCISO stuff where you parachute and you go like, do this. And then you off again for like, another, month. And you come back and you go, well, you did that and you didn't do this. And so do all of this. And then you bugger off again. Mm-hmm. Well, this is, you're living this shit every single day. So it's really, really nice to see it work properly.
That's cool, man. That's cool. So you talk about maritime. I don't know. I mean, I didn't know much about your maritime experience until you and I started talking just before I took on my my previous role, and you gave me some good words of advice and some information, things to look at. I mean, what can you say about your maritime background? We know your aeronautic background, but what about
same stuff, just slightly wetter. So yeah, I have cease and desists from a couple of the larger oil and gas organizations that have stuff sitting out in the middle of there that move things around, including the really, really big LPG one it was fun to play with. And so for me, again, it was the same thing. It was like, what principles can I apply? It's transportation. I'm looking at aviation and vehicles and all these things. They all have to some degree a common set of platforms. You have an engine, you have an set of controls, and then you have a whole bunch of schism in the middle that kind of does the weird shit that makes it all work. And so it's like anything. Take that step back and go, how? What kind of a network is it? What kind of tools is it? What kind of tech is it? It's an engine. Engines only have a couple of different ways they can effectively communicate once something leaves the engine to tell the person at the pointy end what's happening. You've only got a couple of different ways that can happen. So when you start looking at it, you're okay, well, I recognize that kind of networking protocol stack. Then when you start looking at all the controls around it and you start looking at, for me, I went after ballast. Ballast was a huge amount of fun. And very, very nasty as well. I demonstrated to some very interesting folks. I did a live demo until they said basically take your hands off the keyboard. And I was literally sitting. I'd gotten into the V9000 systems, the SATCOM systems, and the nav systems, and we'd broken past the nav updates. And because some muppet had decided to connect the systems together, I'm sitting on the ballast control system, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, okay, well, I can open up all of these along one side of the ship, and they're like, literally, take your hands off the keyboard, please. I'm like, come on, it'll be fun. You can make it. It can.
Make everybody start walking on the walls.
Yeah, my thought was that tankers take miles to do anything. And the stupid thing is like, slow the hell down. At 5 miles later, it eventually does something. Like, just bank it. Just turn it into a bank. Fill up the one side of ballast, and it'll turn nicely. I'm like, no, shit doesn't work that way. They weren't very happy with me.
Yeah.
Try it on a model first,
scary.
right?
Yeah.
No, do it live, real time. Makes it interesting.
That was scary.
Yeah, we were in Fort Lauderdale, and they had that Hack the Port conference, and they had set up something like that, where the wasn't real. They had a boat with simulated with ballast, and actually a tank. It was sitting in the middle of this, the convention center.
Yeah,
actual big tank filled with water and a boat in there.
Fun. The waves were awesome.
And they had these college kids working on trying to flip the boat, and they actually did it.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's and the problem is, I mean, that's in a standardized setting. That's in a very confined, hey, this is how we set it up. You get out on the high seas, and I mean, unfortunately, I've come across it too many times where, you're out there for a period of time. You either have to bodge something to make it work, or you don't want to be up on the bridge all the time, or pick your excuse.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care which one it is, but somehow or other, you, the human, becomes, unfortunately, the common point of compromise between me messing with navigation and me messing with all those nasty things that keep the thing afloat and doing in the right directions. And so it's unfortunately, it has been too easy, and unfortunately, it is still in many cases a wide open target. Which, we'd be messing with agriculture again. Getting off on a tangent. Years ago we hacked the tractors.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, we actually wanted to plant seed so that when they grew, we could actually have a picture of Elvis or a picture of like some deity in the middle of the field. We go,
Nice.
"We found him." But very quickly it went to like, shit, look, we can stop all the crops from growing. And so we squirreled and went off that way. So we're coming back at it again because the tech's moved on, 10 years, but the vulnerabilities are still there. And it's, we were doing all of this kind of stuff, and then we went after ships and all sorts of other things. We still have a very interconnected world, and with maritime especially, you can bring. We know it. You can bring a country to its knees by simply, especially in the US and Europe. I mean, all you've got to do is flip something over in about 4 key critical places, and this country will be on its knees.
Yeah.
Way too easy.
So I guess I had a question for that, because it's, me coming from a non-technical background, just, more physical security, studying those type of things throughout my career. But, starting to get, so I work on the regulatory side of things. And so looking at how, from a regulatory standpoint, we can provide, standards and regulations that would make things more secure. But I think this is the one thing.
Hang on.
Yeah.
So I'm going to inject there. Putting standards in place does not make it more secure.
No. I agree.
So never ever mix standards and procedures and protocols in the same sentence as security. Those two, unfortunately, in most cases, are like mutually exclusive, because people do one and assume it leads to the other, and it never does.
No, you're absolutely right. We got into a great argument one time about what words on paper actually do for anything, right? We put them in the regulations, we put them in the laws, and until you have the people or the systems in place, they essentially do nothing for you, right?
But even when you put the systems in place, let's be honest. So let's go to this one. We're squirreling, but we're not squirreling. PCI, payment card industry, has been in place for almost 20 years, give or take a bit. Somebody could probably correct me online, but let's say give or take a bit, 20 years. Agreed?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If it was effective, would we have reduced the amount of credit card fraud? And have we reduced the amount of credit card fraud?
I would guess not. I haven't looked at the stats, but I'd guess not, judging by that question.
Yeah.
So I'm of the opinion that it's more about the culture of the organization as to whether or not your system is effective. Because I mean, like he was saying, standards, regulations, all that. Cool. It gives some people a place to start at least, but it's not wholly effective. If you have actual security, you're going to be compliant. You know what I mean? At least,
yes.
Again,
yes.
That's my opinion, and that's also in my opinion, the greatest struggle that we have is really establishing that a culture of security in general. We've talked before about it's the safety side of the house, how it was born in blood and all that, and that's an extensive argument. But until we adapt the same kind of mentality with regard to security, and not just physical or cyber. But security in general.
At the end of the day, it's the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't like the separating them. It's the same thing, like the perfect example. We're going to go back to what we're doing with Boom. It's that same thing.
I like this guy.
I mean, we've all got the same war wounds, unfortunately. And we're doing the same thing. I mean, we're actually, so the building we're going into, we're talking with the physical security folks. They're working with us to go, hey, as we put this system in place, how do we integrate it with the surveillance systems? How do we integrate with the badge systems? How do we make sure that you have the visibility that you need to be effective, no matter what we're up to? So, because you can't separate the two. And actually, what's going to become more and more critical over the years, you move out of maritime space and you move into where security's going, and how we're putting more tech into our bodies and more tech into our lives, that physical and digital barrier become way, way, way more blurred.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that
Absolutely.
and that was kind of where. So the second part of my question earlier, though, is you talk about what you were doing, getting into the ballast system and things like that. I think that's where the disconnect kind of is because some people think of that as kind of the realm of impossibility, or that they're not going to get that far, or even if they did, there's always going to be somebody on watch to intercede once they seed. So what's your view on that? Like those two
Absolutely.
opinions about how that's going to get shut down.
So I think it's interesting because it's the same thing. It's the same argument we have with critical infrastructure, and to some degree, there's validity to it. No two ways about it. Our industry, unfortunately, cybersecurity industry, unfortunately, is not good in general at looking outside of itself. We unfortunately take this view as like, oh, we're wonderful and everybody else is dumb as a box of rocks. To your point exactly, if all of a sudden I suddenly initiate an engine shutdown or a system shutdown or an oil pressurization issue or something like that, in many, many cases, there are physical controls, and the engineers have got goodness knows how many years of bloody experience are like, this shit ain't right.
Right.
And so you have that potential. However, it gets a little nastier when you start looking at maritime in the future. You start looking at autonomous ships. You start looking at those really great big engines, especially the ones that cost rather a lot of money, and you have reliability checks built into these things. So you have, what's the word? Predictive maintenance. So in other words, if something feels like it's failing, it doesn't just go drop off. It drops off and then goes straight into dry dock on it, whatever. So in some ways, it's not a matter of turning the ruddy thing over. All I need to do, in the same with aviation, I can ground an entire fleet of planes by simply making one light blink.
Very true.
I've created a predictive maintenance issue, and you're going to have to go, hey, we have all of our data. We have the blinky red light. Where's something missing? What's going on? And that's going to take an awful lot of time. I don't have to kill anybody. It's fun to do that. But I don't have to kill anybody to prove a point. All I have to do is make one light blink. And that's
very true.
Yeah.
Pretty powerful light.
Yeah, very much so.
Well, I don't know.
Was it
like
there
my
just
ex-wife. Just drive with the the service engine light on until the engine seizes up.
Yeah, my mom did that. My mom did that.
Yeah.
Pretty orange light.
Yeah, exactly.
And wasn't there just a ship, LNG ship, that did like 2/3 of its voyage autonomously?
Yes.
I thought I just read something about that.
There was something it was on, I know what it was. It was up on LinkedIn. Somebody tagged me on it on LinkedIn. I went, and they're like, I'm like, challenge accepted. I think was the only thing I shot back.
Yeah. I mean, they've been minimally crewed for decades. There's minimal crews on those, especially the tankers, those ultra large crude carriers. I mean, those things. Maybe 20 people on board, to begin with. So yeah.
And I think as that trend continues, unfortunately, my job becomes easier because I won't run into a roughneck with 20 years of experience that calls bullshit on something. I'll run into somebody who's been hired at the minimal amount possible, has been trained to the lowest standard necessary, and has been shuttered around from ship to ship to ship and doesn't actually know how it feels, how it sounds, how it smells, how it should be. And so, unfortunately, that crazy amount, that wealth of experience isn't being replaced as effectively as it should do, which means, unfortunately, my life gets easier.
And on top of that, life at sea is a hard life. And if you're solely relying on the human sitting there, you've got the human element to play into that.
Oh, yeah. And there's so much of that. I mean, it's we all, as humans, doesn't matter how many times I run education, we're all going to be susceptible to something. You're at sea for a period of time, and all of a sudden they send something, hey, your significant other's had an accident. Here is attached is the PDF containing information, please respond immediately. You won't think twice. Yep. You'll click on it. Good point. Now I got a shell. I'm in.
Yep.
It's not nice, but unfortunately the bad guys aren't nice.
Yeah. I mean, long are gone are the days where we'd sit there and we'd get steak and lobster for dinner on the ship we knew that was bad news coming after that. But
Yeah.
but
Wait, you got steak and lobster on board?
well, I'm sorry, Mike. You and crayons and coloring books. That's what you had. But
They just had to get you a juice box, I think was all.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Lunchable in a juice box, man.
This sounds like a Navy versus Marines conversation. I
yes, yes, it is.
I came out of British military, so this sounds horribly familiar.
Yep.
There we go.
There we go. There we go. That'll do it.
But yeah, I mean, it's one of the projects I got to work on back in my days in intelligence. It was really surprising just how interconnected a lot of the shipboard systems were. To be able to go from GPS to an engine room, and whatever it was there that just, you could sit there and basically bring a ship down to a crawling halt,
Yeah.
And it's just amazing. So, but the other part about maritime is we talked about the ships, but the shore side as well.
Oof.
And yeah, exactly. I mean,
oh, those cranes. Oh,
yeah, those cranes. I tell you, and you see in the news where like, oh my God, the FBI raided, or not FBI, but somebody raided, like, hey, yeah, there's a crane coming in and we need to check it out and everything else. And I'm like, well, really,
yeah,
but I think
there's so much. I mean, to your point, there is so much. There's the very visible stuff, which is the cranes, the shuttles, the lorries, all the other stuff. And then you got the stuff which is less so visible, which is all the tagging, so all the GPS taggings, all the near field communication tagging systems, and then you got the database itself. So every single one of those ready containers has got to manifest, and every single one of them's got to go from point A and eventually end up at the right point. And there's a very, very convoluted system of doing it. And unfortunately, again, it is in a lot of cases more vulnerable than I think most people want to accept.
Yeah, I think we saw that with the ransomware attack in South Africa. That basically took down their ability to send and receive containers and stuff like that all out of there. And now it's just attacking the database and the computer systems.
I think that's the part of it. And unfortunately, again, you look at no different than a lot of the other industries. The maritime industry isn't just a set of companies. You got primes, you got secondaries, you got tertiaries, you got vendors, you got supply chain. You have hundreds of intricate systems that all need to work together. I mean, you run one of those yards, you've got so much stuff coming in and coming out, and management and everything else that goes with it. Again, you typically have somebody who's been there, or a team of folks who understand it, know it. But I mean, we saw it in the UK. The UK just went through it. They got rid of, it was P&O lines, just got rid of like hundreds of their workforce. And some of those folks have been there for years. They understand how these things work. They understand how to move freight and move goods and move humans on and off these ruddy things. And you're going to replace them, unfortunately, with folks who don't have that depth, knowledge, experience, and time on land or on ship. And it's, for me, again, as the adversary and the attacker, it just makes my life so much easier.
Yeah, because they don't know what's bad, right? And they don't know what's good.
Right. They haven't, they don't know in the middle of July this kind of thing happens. In the middle of winter, this kind of thing happens. They haven't had that seasoned amount of time, and they haven't had like an apprenticeship program for somebody else to come up through the system to understand it.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. Companies, they start looking at people my age, our age, and like, hey, we can hire somebody cheaper and younger.
Yeah.
That's.
Yeah.
That's a big problem, I think, with the recruiting and everything else, is that a lot of these organizations are like, they forget the seasoning that took us to get to this point.
Yeah, it's that, I go back to Boom for a second. I typically, when I go into the office, I will deliberately park my car and I will walk in through the hangar. I'll go in that way for a couple of reasons. One, because it reminds me of why the hell I'm here. It's a really great big experimental aircraft there, and it reminds me why I'm actually doing my job. Secondly, it's the smell. It's the feeling and the smell and all of the other things that go with it that, again, go, okay, this feels right. This is right. I remember. I mean, it's all of those things. And that that doesn't go away. So, it's kind of interesting.
One of the other challenges I see in maritime is that a lot of the current workforce has been and still does have that institutional knowledge because they've been around for a very, very long time, but it's hard to attract people into the industry that haven't been predisposed to it. You know what I mean? And so, like, for example, let's take the city of Houston as an example, right? It's one of the largest ports in the country.
Yeah.
There are literal ships that come into what's considered downtown inside the loop.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of the public don't even know that there's a port there, let alone what it does and how crucial it is to their way of life. It's seriously, like, I was born and raised in Galveston, and of course Galveston has the oldest port in
Galveston's pretty awesome. Yeah, that's kind of cool, that place.
It's definitely interesting, but like growing up there, my dad would take me out to the port to go fishing, but I never really had a concept of what was actually going on out there until after I got out of the Marine Corps and just happened to stumble upon a contract security job out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I feel like we need to do a better job in the maritime industry of trying to attract and recruit people, into some of these maritime programs, apprenticeships, internships, things of that nature. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I hadn't ever really thought about it that way, but it makes sense. Now, here's the problem with that. That means work. That's hard work, and unfortunately.
Hold on, I'm breaking out in hives. I think I'm allergic. Somebody said work. I'm allergic.
We have entered. I'm trying to be as kind as I can. We have entered an era where I think that
people don't want to work.
Yeah, that's probably I can't think of any simpler way of putting that.
Yeah, nobody said we had to be politically correct, Chris.
All right. Yeah. Yeah,
that's what the whole disclaimer is about.
It was PG, not PC.
Yeah, there we go. We have a lot of fucking special snowflakes who just don't want to get the damn hands dirty.
Oh man.
Yeah.
There we go. That can be edited later.
Hey, there's a reason why we're still having a lot of the supply chain shortages that we're having, and that's because of lack of labor, lack of people to help move this cargo.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we went for so long saying you have to have a college degree. You're not going to be successful unless you have a college degree, right? What about all the trades and all that? Those still, I mean, hell, a plumber makes more money than a lot of the people in cybersecurity do.
Yeah. Well, I love that. That to me, I got a couple of good friends. So inside, like the Hillbilly Hit Squad side of us, there's a couple of us there's a couple of folks more so than I am by a long way that are much more hands-on. I got mechanical engineers, electrical engineers. We have, head-on, full-on mechanics. We've got one of the crew at one of our locations who farms the land as well. I mean, he runs electrical mechanical engineering organization and also farms. So I love it because I learn so much as well. And you get different mentality, different mindset. And it's the college degree thing drives me nuts. You can hear the crashing backwards and forwards. That's the puppy upstairs who's decided it's time to go zooming around the place. I think
thought you were getting raided.
Oh yeah, no. Normally I get notifications if that happens these days. They're actually still pretty good. Hey, we're over in a couple of hours. Put the kettle on. Okay, I got you. Or one agency sends me a message saying the other agency is about to arrive on the doorstep, and I'm like, I love you guys. You're awesome. Thank you. But
There
we,
you go.
I think you're right, Mike. I mean, Mike, you're right on that one. We've seen it in this industry, and there's a couple of like amazing people in our industry that are working to get apprenticeships running, that are working to get not just the community colleges, but folks coming out of the military. I'm like, you got some amazing freaking people that are coming out of it. So I love Boom. Same thing. And we got so many former Dot Mill folks in there. It's family again. It's that
Yeah.
mentality. It's back to family again.
I
And
had, I was, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to. I was
no,
gonna
you
say, I
did.
mean, I've got a kid that's getting ready to graduate, but what I've noticed recently is the high school is starting to promote kids going into the workforce. So instead of having the
Yeah.
collegiate athletics scholarship signing days, they've been having signing days for kids that are going into the workforce straight out of high school, out of industry, and I think that's great to see. It's
Yeah.
like you said, Chris. For years, it was go to college or you're not going to make it, and there were just so many people I was in school with that it was just obvious. You're not. Some people just aren't cut out for it. It's not an insult. It's just not their thing,
Yeah.
But to
I'm one of
force, yeah,
Yeah, I left school at 15.
yeah.
Yeah, and
But to continue to force that has led us to a lot of what we face now. But I think it's great. I think a lot of people have recognized that, but it's going to take some time. But it's great to see that. I'm really excited to see where that goes with some of these programs that they've started at the high school levels, especially.
Yeah. I think
community colleges.
it's going to take a lot more, like, people like myself and Chris in the positions we're currently sitting in. We're sitting there, we're driving the job descriptions for any new hires within
That
cyber.
right there.
And that's the key piece right there, is because, I'm like, I don't want somebody with a 4-year bachelor degree over somebody, I'd rather have somebody that's got 4 years of military experience, without a degree,
I want drive and passion. That's all I care about.
Yeah.
Everything else I can teach.
Yeah.
Especially with the stuff we do, I need somebody who has the ethics and morals, at least pointing in generally the right direction most of the time. But then again, it's fun to go, shit happens, let's face it. But at least for the most part, at least try to point in the right direction. And then I want somebody who's got the drive. I want somebody who cares. Everything else I can teach.
Yeah.
Everything else.
I had a kid reach out to me today. He's like, hey, I had sent out my weekly, hey, be careful about phishing emails to the entire company. And, we stopped a phishing attack last week. Good job to everybody that reported it and stuff like that. And I had this kid come back to me today. He goes, hey, I want to get into cybersecurity. How did you do it? What can I do? And I'm like, this kid, he's got promise. He actually took the first step to reach out to me and say, hey, so I'm like, now I got someone to mentor inside the new organization and stuff like that. So, keep that fire going, to keep him going.
We're doing the same thing. We, I've come into that place. I've been in like 6 weeks now. I'm already, a couple of the IT folks are like, hey, we're interested. I'm like, great. Here's some stuff. Here's this. I'm working with them. I just, Charles, who's the CIO over there, Charles came in with a bunch of lockpick sets. I brought a whole bunch more stuff in as well. And everybody's picking locks and testing this stuff out.
Sweet.
And then we just had an opening, like a junior opening. So rather than go outside, we had one of the folks that was working down in shipping. We just brought him up, and he's coming up to join us on the IT side, and he wants to know security. I'm like, great.
That's cool.
Anything I can do. And he's got drive. I'm like, I have no problem running down the micro center, picking up an Arduino, a monitor, a screen, and a keyboard, and just handing that to you, handing you a whole bunch of stuff. How do you learn? Is it books? Is it physical breaking shit? Or what do you do? And then just have at it, come back with questions.
Yeah.
That's awesome to hear, to hear about, like, because I was, before I got this new job that I'm getting ready to start, I was looking to try to break into the IT security side or the InfoSec side of the house. And, Chris was essentially mentoring me for a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah,
like
I failed.
No, you didn't. Anyway, but I was looking to get, because like for me, I've been physical security for the majority of my career, but I'd be ignorant. And this is one of the things that I was telling some of my coworkers, is to get more involved in the InfoSec side and try to learn it more, because let's face it, physical security is going to be diminished, if you will, to a certain degree in lieu of infosec. At least that's the trend that we're currently on. And the reality is that they're both security. So if you know the theories, you know the principles of physical security, you can learn the infosec side of the house.
Mm-hmm.
But you gotta get the exposure. The only way that you're gonna do that is if you walk in there and say, "Hey, how you doing? I want to learn."
Well, it's that, and it's also, to me, I put a lot of I don't know what the right way of putting it is. I weigh it heavily when somebody's like, so, for the perfect example, physical to digital security, the big tie-ins on there are the surveillance systems, the monitoring systems, the management systems, the logging systems, and all that. If you understand those, and if you're like, hey, I was looking at this, and we've got this, and I know this would tie into some of the stuff you guys are talking about, and even looking at the IoT stuff and looking at the surveillance stuff and all that stuff, knowing and understanding that rather than just going, hey, I know my physical, because we learn the same stuff in the InfoSec side of the world.
Right.
Because I've spent years, same thing, breaking into places physically and digitally.
You just said it, like lockpicks, right? That it's and that's the thing. If you go to you go to Black Hat or DEF CON, lockpicking villages, right? The physical piece of security is so much part of information security.
It's huge, and I think that's why I love it. A perfect example where I'm hanging out at the moment. We're working with that team. It's facilities have the ownership, but literally, we're doing meetings. Not quite every day, but like every couple of days, we're sitting down and going, hey, what do you think? Where do you think? What do you think? How are we doing? Surveillance camera systems. We've all got ideas where they should be. Let's just sit down with a freaking map of the organization and let's play the game. Let's actually go, hey, what happens if I do this? What happens if I try to do this? What happens if I come in there? Because you'll get the best of both minds. Yeah. As opposed to one team or the other going, well, I think they should be here. I'd much rather sit down around a freaking table and go, well, what happens if we do A, B, and C? It's basically role playing.
It needs to be a collaborative effort. It needs.
Well, Mike, you and me, right? When we worked together, it's like we did this joint cyber physical type of exercise, right? And there's things that I brought up that you'd never thought of, and conversely, things you brought up, and then in the end, we're like, wow, this is one hell of a security drill, and it overall end up improving the security of the organization. So
and it wasn't, and I think the great thing about that one, especially so we ran a few of them, and the concept that we used wasn't overly complex, because one of the biggest things that we wanted to do was be able to show benefit, and if we overcomplicated it, we wouldn't be able to do that effectively with everybody else that was going to have to buy into it. You know what I mean?
Was it? Well,
yep. Sis over here having technical difficulties.
Totally crappy internet.
Didn't pay my bill this month.
What's this whole pay? That's what database injection was for goodness sakes.
No, I was saying it's like with cyber, right? And we're actually with the 9/11 Commission. That's why I was going 9/11 Commission. Wasn't that they said it was like the lack of imagination?
Bingo.
And if you could sit there and somebody could think it up.
Yep.
There's a potential way of an attack occurring. And people weren't following that imagination.
Yep.
I think the other thing is as well is, Mike, knowing some of the similar, having worked with some of the teams when we collaborated in a couple of the sandbox areas. We all worked at the time, we were 6-man teams. I think we've gone the American way now, like 10 or 12-man teams. But every single one of us brought something different to the theater. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And I think it's trusting and relying on that, which is something in our own industry and even in other areas we haven't done effectively. We walk into a room and we think we have to own it all. Well, we don't. There's a whole bunch of us around the damn table that are all basically aiming for the same goal. Let's all it's a different mentality as well.
Yeah. And I feel like at the end of the day, though, And this goes back to what I mentioned earlier, the culture, right? So like
Mhm.
we've been talking a
Mhm.
lot about how, it needs to be a collaborative effort. InfoSec, physical should be sitting at the table talking through everything. But I think it's also important to at least try to get the business units that are responsible for each of these elements to sit at the table as well. That way, hopefully they could better understand why we're all there, because ultimately, let's face it, security, either infosec or physical, is primarily overhead in vast majority of
Mhm.
organizations.
Yeah.
So if you don't get that business unit to the table, at the end of the day, you're beating your head against the wall unless you can get their buy-in, and that's what's going to help drive that culture. You know what I mean?
I did a bunch of work years ago at one of the big retail companies, and I remember walking in there and having a long conversation with the teams, and we actually had the business conversation. I'm like, all right, how do we provide value? And they're like,
Right.
"Ooh." I'm like, all right. I said, I know in retail you lose things, stuff walks out of the door or whatever
Yep.
else. I'm like, what's the damage? And the physical security guy spoke up and he's like, about 200 million a year. I'm like, how do we work on that?
Mhm.
And the conversation, I mean, we ended up going off down this rabbit hole for a while, and we built we literally halved that slippage in a 2-year period.
That's
Wow.
amazing.
I mean, and that was
That's
just
amazing.
from sitting down with physical security and digital security and the business. And with
Yep.
the business, it was let's understand how something goes from thought and idea all the way through to ending up basically in the retail front. Let's look at
Yeah.
every single step along the way, and let's see how and where we can influence it. And then, exactly to your point, let's do the tabletop exercises. What happens if I do this? And so we end up doing a whole bunch of this. And we started whacking the low hanging fruit, better tagging, better monitoring, better
Yep.
architecture on the containers, and just everything along the way. And all of a sudden, the business was like, holy shit, this actually, yeah, it's costing us some money to do this, but you're saving way more than you're costing
Yep.
us. Keep going, and
Yep.
thank you.
Yep. And that's another
So,
thing that I think a lot
yeah,
of us struggle with. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say I think that's another thing that a lot of us struggle with right now is the sticker shock, if you will. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you start talking about security in general, both especially infosec and physical, tying them both together, that's a big sticker shock up front. And that's one of the things that I know I've struggled with, is getting people to understand that, yeah, we're going to be spending some money right now, but look at the long-term benefit. We can't think about just today, tomorrow, even next year. We need to look 5, 10 years down the road.
So here's something I would try as well, because it doesn't actually have to be a huge sticker shock. Perfect example on this one. The conversation we had last week when it was, let's look at consolidating logging, monitoring, asset inventory, blah, 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 all this into one package. The standard way of looking at it is, we'll just put it all in Splunk. Well, that's great until you realize how much Splunk costs. Prohibitively scary expensive. Does a really nice job, but horribly expensive. So
Yeah.
let's set that as maybe a 3 to 5 year goal. But in the meantime, how could we grow into it? Could we
Right.
use Graylog, open source and free? Could we use something else that gets us that stepping stone? So yeah,
Yeah.
eventually the sticker shock might be scary, and I'll tell you about it. But I'm also going to say, hey, we actually don't have to do that. We can actually start off, prove out the point, demonstrate capability, and do it for a hell of a lot less, because there's a ton of good open source stuff there that doesn't mean that you got to have a PhD in computer engineering just to get the stupid thing running. It's actually shit ton load of it is about as idiot proof as everything that's on the commercial shelf.
That's what I would need.
I believe me, I mean, I still code and I can still do assembler language and a few other fun crazy things that I can do, but if there's a GUI, I'm pressing the fucking button. I made this simple for a reason. I don't need to have a command line. I don't have to remember my regex command line if all I can do is go drag, drop, go.
Hey, Nick, is he speaking like some kind of foreign language to you, just like he is me right now?
Yeah, it's like it's kind of like when my in-laws start speaking Spanglish, and so like I know a lot of the English, I catch some of the Spanish, kind of stuff. So yeah, that's the way it is where we come from. But I did have a thing going back to kind of something you made earlier. I thought it was a great point about learning, making sure you learn how your people learn, and not expect.
Yes.
So you said, how do you learn? Do you learn by breaking stuff? Do you learn by reading it? And I think that that's an awesome thing, but it takes time, right? It takes time and investment to be able to just say, look, you're going to have a manual, and that's all you get, and you figure it out, right? But
Yeah,
how have you overcome that mentality in your world of work?
I think because of how I learn. I mean that, and some of that comes from the fact that I was really fortunate. In school, when I went to school, I was the last year of school where they did. I did what's known as O levels and A levels in England, and I was the very last year. After that, they did these things called GCSEs. I don't know what the hell it stands for, but it was basically when I went to school, it was you do the 4 years worth of studying, 2 to 4 years worth of studying, and at the end of it, you do an exam, and that exam is worth 80% of that 4 years worth of shenanigans.
Oh
The
wow,
other,
yeah.
yeah. Nowadays, they've balanced it. So the coursework is worth 80% and the exam's worth 20. I would have been screwed. I would have failed everything because I don't learn the way they were teaching. And back then it was like, well, you're a pain in the ass and you just don't pay attention, blah, 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 blah. Nowadays, they've figured out acronyms for the damn stuff.
Right.
So I come at it from a very empathetic viewpoint because I don't expect to be able to hand you a manual and 6 weeks later you come back and go, blah, 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 and fuck that for Game of Soldiers. I'll hand you computers. I'll tell you to go down to the Arc store or Goodwill and go buy a couple of computers for $10 each and rip them to pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out what every single piece in there does. I mean, $10 worth of computer, you've still got memory, you've still got drives, you've still got all the other crazy shit in there. And internet is a really good place to find shit out. So there are so many ways to learn, and even sitting down and just basically geeking out for an hour or two is also a good way, as long as I can then set you some things to go figure out. So I come at it from an empathetic viewpoint because I know what it's like to learn differently.
But how would you? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say, so I guess the next question then would be, so obviously you figured out how to target the workforce that you work with on a day-to-day basis, but then the people outside of that day-to-day, so the people that are in the business unit, they're not dealing with the cybersecurity side of things, but they're just as important to learn. So how do you get to that base level of learning with them?
You teach them on a consistent basis. So we're about to roll out end user awareness training. And what we're doing is we're not doing company training. We're helping people. So I'm going to teach you how to help your kids be safer online, how to help your parents and grandparents be safer online, how to help you be safer online, how to ask more questions. I'm going to teach you during certain times of the year, certain things. It's January, it's tax season, it's February, nobody loves you on the internet, and all this other stuff. That's what I'm going to teach. And because I'm teaching you, the person, about how you can help yourself as you interact in the digital world, it bleeds into the company. Will I help you understand some company stuff? Yeah. But when I talk, perfect example, we're already having the conversations inside the office. We're talking about data classification model. That shit's a complete snooze fest.
Yeah.
You break it down and go, hey, look, I got 4 pockets. I got 4 pockets of data. I can take some of your data. Now I'm going to ask 4 questions. 1, can I go out on the street corner and yell at anybody that goes by at the top of my voice? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, great. Now that's public data. Now, I can't go talk to everybody on the street, but can I go talk to my friends about their data? Okay, that's private data. Now, if I can't talk to anybody, maybe I can talk to the friends and family in my house as long as Alexa's not freaking listening. Now, here's the data that I'm never going to utter a word about. It stays in my head only. Now you've got restricted confidential.
Yeah.
Data classification model in 4 sentences that everybody can understand.
Yep.
There
That's
you go.
the key. You're getting it down to a denominator that everybody can sit there and sit there and really it helps them understand.
Yeah.
Because and just like you said, and that's one of the things I try to do with my awareness program is like, okay, yeah, we do this, and I'm teaching you So you can go tell your grandmother when she goes to Facebook not to click that like because whatever those types of things is just bringing it home to them so they completely understand in their own personal lives. And like you said, it automatically goes back and reflects. And I think
Now,
it's the
here's
same
the
thing
other.
with the
It's a
physical
shift in
security
language.
side.
It's a
You
shift
know,
in language. I'm not teaching you
nope.
because that implies I have authority over you.
Yeah.
I'm helping you. We are going to
Yep.
work together on how you can help friends, family, and kids. Now there's no authority. Now it's, hey, we're a pair of folks sitting down and we're going through some shit.
You're empowering them to sit
I'm
there and help
helping them.
their
I'm
families.
helping them. I'm not even
Yeah.
empowering them. I'm helping them.
Oh no, you help them, but they end up in being empowered with their families.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
absolutely.
just like when hey Chris, my computer is running really slow, and now I become the tech support, right? That's the
Totally.
type of thing.
Totally.
It's the same thing. You give
Yeah.
them like, hey, I got this email that says I need to type in my password, and like,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Well, we
yeah.
have it now because we're getting more and more traction in the public space. So
Mhm.
we have a number of the leadership team are getting focused on more. And again, one of those Alice in Wonderland moments, they're coming along saying, "Hey, can you help us?" And I'm like, "I love you. I'm going to hug you. I want to hug you, and I want to pat you, and I want to cuddle you, and I want to call you mine." Can't say that to their faces, but I really want to. But it's
I'll forward this to them so they go.
they wouldn't expect anything different from me to be. Yeah, bless them. It probably scare them still, but it's fun. No, it's. I did to give a shout out. I've done a bunch of work with a company called Wiser Training. Now, Gabrielle is a freaking awesome human being, like a seriously cool guy. And I helped them out for quite some time. And we built something called the Wisenary. It's a compendium. And it takes geek speak and turns it into plain, simple English. And then you want to talk about how do you get through to the business? You talk their language.
Yep.
You don't go in there and start spouting at you in the physical security. I'm not going to go in there and start talking about 8-foot and 12-foot fences and cameras and blah, 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 blah. We're going to have a conversation about their home. We're going to explain it to them in a context and in a language they understand and that they're comfortable with.
Yep.
Nice.
Vitally important. I think Chris and I were talking about that for quite a while with regard to like one of the responsibilities of a CISO is translating.
Yes.
Really.
Yes.
Being able to translate up and down.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and exactly to your point, it's that audience. I was fortunate, again, I've walked into Boom very quick, very fresh, but Charles has been there for I think a while, like 6 months or something. So he's done an amazing job of like laying that groundwork of understanding the people. And what I love about him, almost every conversation when we're like sharing slides and everything else, he's like, I've got no there's no pride in ownership is what he calls it. And I love it because there's so much collaboration that happens. And it's nice because he knows how we need to discuss things with the advisory board and with the board of directors and with other leaders. And so that's been an absolute boom. But I think even if that wasn't there, we have to shift how we have a conversation. Instead of walking in there going, hey, here's my security, dictate, you sit down with a cup of tea and biscuits or coffee and donuts and go, hey, let's have a conversation. Can we just talk, please?
I need to try that tea and biscuit thing.
I love my tea and biscuits. I share my tea bags at the office. I share my tea bags at the office.
For Mike, it's Monster. So,
oof.
I'm up to 3 a day right now.
Oy, aye. Look, crayons are bad enough. Don't mix it with
hey, look, it's been a crazy. Oh gosh, what month now? Yeah, like this past month has been really, really, really crazy for me. So it's been really intense, and hopefully here soon I'll be a little bit on the downward slide, if you will. But these next couple of weeks are still going to be kind of crazy. So
Mike, you never want to be on the downward side. You always want to be going up the mountain.
Well, you know what I mean, as far as like amount of craziness in all facets. So, but I've been checking off a couple of boxes. So, but for the next couple of weeks, maybe even month, I might have to up it to 4.
Oof! Don't do it. Seriously, don't do it. His and this is
That
coming.
hurts my kidneys just hear that. I got a kidney stone in law school, and I blame it directly on energy drinks, man. And that was the last time I had an energy drink.
Oof.
But I don't even know. I wasn't up to 3 or 4 a day, but I don't know if that was actually it. There's probably a lot of other factors, but I blamed it on energy drinks. I gave
You're
it
in law school.
Hey, look, alcohol kills a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
so,
the stress. Yeah.
We just finished up brewing a batch of tractor fuel that we will we just
Nice.
we were testing that earlier, and it's good enough that it will it numbed the tongue and the cheek. I'm like, this is a good one. This is a good one. I'm happy with this one. Yeah.
There you go.
I shouldn't rubbish the monster drinks too much when I'm, it's one for the tractor, one for the test, one for the tractor.
There you go.
That works. Yeah.
I literally I don't know. I'm weird. I have 2 back to back in the morning, and then a little bit later I'll have a third one.
Then you get a sponsorship deal, aren't you?
Probably.
I should. I really should. At least.
Well, we gotta get him to sponsor this show. Yeah. all 15 people that watch it. Yeah. All 15 people that watch this that subscribe to the show. So.
I mean, if we had been on more on target with some of the weeks that we've missed, we might be up to 20 by now.
I'll have to grab the link for this. I'll put a LinkedIn. I promise I will put a LinkedIn post out. Actually, it'll be nice. I'll put one out tomorrow because that'll avoid me talking about that lunatic asylum in San Francisco. This will be way more fun than talking about that sodding madness.
Well, yeah, I tell you, it's this is one of those things that just started out for us. It's like, hey, we're all at a conference. We're all sitting there, and we're all on a panel together. And this panel never ends. It just turns into another show. So,
it's almost 2 years now. It's almost a 2-year-long panel we've been on.
That's awesome. We have the security shit show. So we do that on Thursday nights, and that's of a similar ilk. There's 3 of us in the industry just got together a while ago, and same thing. Almost every Thursday, a couple we've missed, but almost every Thursday we get together and we do this online and we just talk, and it's a very, very cathartic way of just trying to make sense of the industry sometimes.
Yeah,
there you go. Nice.
We don't have the disclaimer, unfortunately or fortunately. We do. Every now and again, the air gets a little blue colored and vendor names come out. So it is what it is.
People grow thicker skin.
Yeah.
They'll get there eventually.
Well, that and the fact I've got enough cease and desist letters that they have their own space in the filing cabinet. So
right next to the IRS taxes, right?
Oh man! Thankfully, those are mostly sorted out. Although I got yelled at for something. I don't agree with how they've assessed something, so then we're gonna have to go throw rocks at each other. It'll be fun.
There you go.
Oh man, good stuff.
Well,
good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, Chris, we really, really, really appreciate you taking the time out, and I know you probably still have to pack your suitcase.
Oh, I mean, I've still got to label about 12.5 bottles and get them all stuck. Yeah, it is, and I'm still doing another podcast. We're pre-recording this evening. I got a meeting at midnight with friends over in Israel. So yeah,
at midnight.
Yeah, nice. It's Israel, so I don't work their mornings. I work their mornings rather than them having to, because I'm not a morning person. As soon as I left active service, I'm like, and I'm going back to bed. But I work till 2-3 in the morning, so I get up more. So yeah, I'm happier being on a call with them at like midnight, 1-2 o'clock in the morning than I am having to get up at like 7, 8, or 9.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, sir. We appreciate
this was honor and privilege was all mine. Thank you very, very much. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very, very much, chaps.
Same here. Same here. Great to meet you.
Cool.
All right. So with that, Chris doesn't need the disclaimer, but me, Mike, and everybody else does. Yeah, these are our own personal opinions, and do not necessarily reflect the past, current, present, or future, or any other employer that we may not ever potentially work for. So with that, we
Something like
thank
that.
you all again for watching, and have a great night.